Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video, and in this video I'm back with another spoiler review for a recently released game, or technically DLC in this case, and as the DLC for Horizon Forbidden West: The Burning Shores, a DLC that I was really excited for. I mean, Horizon Forbidden West is still one of my favorite games from the last year, and I'm really excited for Horizon 3 for whenever we get that, and this was a DLC that I was really excited for, and the fact that we learned that this was a DLC that takes place after the events of Horizon Forbidden West. Very different from Horizon 1's DLC, The Frozen Wilds, which took place entirely before the ending of that game. And through that, I very much expected there to be a lot of connective tissue between this and the following game, things that would set up future events. And looking at it from that lens, I do come out of this largely disappointed with the DLC. However, beyond that, it is a solid DLC. I think it tells a solid side story with Aloy and focuses around her relationship with a new character in Seiko, and there's cool set pieces along the way. There's obviously a new open world, random additions to the gameplay, and overall it is a very solid DLC. One that does everything that you would expect a typical DLC to do, though considering my expectations of kind of hoping that it would set up more events of the following game, I do think by that lens I come out of it a little bit disappointed, but it's still very strong. I will be talking about my thoughts on the entire DLC, going from beginning to end, but first I do want to talk about some general things first. Starting off with the open world, which ends up being this offshoot of the original map, it obviously being Horizon's version of LA, being around a third of the size of the original map, and essentially just being a series of islands, with many of the islands being very similarly designed to how the OG game was designed, especially the San Francisco area of the map, where it's just the city ruins. Obviously something that stands out here is obviously the addition of volcanoes that makes certain areas stand out, but really as a whole, the map is just kind of fine. I mean, you obviously have your flying mounts that you can use to navigate through the area that make things easier, but outside of that, the amount of water on the map does make it kind of annoying to navigate through when you don't use your flying mount. I mean, they do give you skiffs that you can use to go from island to island, but overall, not my favorite style level design there. Now, obviously, most of the base gameplay is the same as the original game, as you would expect. Many of the side activities follow a similar formula. I mean, the aerial captures are very similar to that of Vistas. They do add in these random collectibles. There's a relic ruin, one that is actually a pretty solid one, the one that leads directly into a side mission that involves the reappearance of Gildan, a character from the Frozen Wilds, which was really random, and that mission ends up leading to some good moments. There's also a couple other side quests that do involve you helping out the Quen, that those in particular do come off a bit more tedious, that don't feel like they do too much outside of you doing these tasks for these other random characters that you meet over the course of the main story, though again, they're not entirely bad. Well, let's start talking about the main campaign of the DLC, which overall I found to be, again, very solid. Again, while there is disappointments in terms of it not really moving the overall plot forward, I feel like it was a very solid character-based DLC that focuses around Aloy and this new character of Seiko. Though we do start off with, again, it feeling like it's going to progress the plot a bit more, where we have Silence calling Aloy over to where we get the entire premise of the DLC, where he mentioned that one of the Far Zeniths escaped from the ending of Forbidden West, and through that we need to track them down, with this Zenith being Walter Lundra and him having escaped to the Burning Shores, which overall does feel kind of like a generic trope here of any sort of side story, with it turning out that like a minor character within the main antagonistic faction ends up escaping and you have to track them down. And again, it does come off very tropey here, but it does end up being a pretty solid setup for Aloy's motivations here, as we do end up flying to the Burning Shore, where conveniently she gets shot down by Lundra's defenses, crash landing right in front of Seika, which is very convenient, but Seika is obviously the other main character of this DLC. Obviously this later love interest for Aloy, but her being a capable fighter in her own right, one that, while isn't anything too special, I do feel like her portrayal and the relationship that builds between her and Aloy is done well enough here to carry the DLC. But obviously this leads to us getting attacked by a bunch of machines, with Seika fighting by our side, which we do end up spending really the bulk of this DLC playing alongside Seika, which really does add to the growing bond between the two. But obviously the two end up agreeing to work together after finding out they have similar motivations, with Aloy obviously going for Lundra, while Seika's looking for her missing sister, during which we do get this nice moment of Seika transporting Aloy on this skiff to the nearby village, which ends up being this really nice introduction to the Burning Shores, giving us some great visuals along the way. But once there, we get to Fleet's End, which ends up being essentially the main civilization in this part of the world, which ends up being pretty similar to every other large village in the main game, though obviously this one takes place right along the coast and ends up being this kind of like port city, so at least that's kind of a different aesthetic, I guess. But again, we work alongside Seika to reach Lundra's tower, which has the typical puzzle platforming sections as you climb your way up, though once reaching the top, we get this pretty cool set piece of us fighting against this Zenith weapon that has us having to climb around to shoot its weak points, this being the first of many pretty large-scale battles in the game. But beyond this, we continue our trek with Seika, during which she ends up riding the Sunwing, to which she ends up being terrified of it at first here, which ends up leading to some nice character moments later on. But you get a pretty lengthy section of us having to follow trails and us using like a ballista to create pathways, which is at least a new type of puzzle section for Horizon. But eventually we do reach Lundra's base, during which we get a pretty convoluted puzzle of having to find a door code through looking through all of Lundra's logs and picking the correct number from them. And I felt like this was a pretty convoluted puzzle in my eyes. But following this, we do follow a new lead, that being to the Hollywood sign, which also ends up being the location of a massive Horus, conveniently. And also conveniently, to progress through this area, we need to take down this shield that's blocking off this cave, to which in doing so, we have to clear out the entire area of machines for some reason, which does end up being a pretty difficult fight here, though. Nice little touch here is how the way to take down the shield here is by Aloy having to be the one to expose the weak point, allowing for Seika to be the one to shoot it herself, obviously adding this level of camaraderie between the two, which ends up being a nice little touch there. Though once entering the cave, we find out the missing Quen here have not been captured, but instead have been indoctrinated by Lundra, with this essentially revealing that Lundra has started a cult, I guess, with again him using his role as a Far Zenith to make people believe he's a god, and all this is just kind of over the top. And I will say, as a whole, I didn't love the Far Zenith's portrayal in the original game. I felt like it was very much black and white for everyone outside of Tilda. Though there, I feel like there's so much complexity around the rest of the story to where for that one aspect of the story to be very black and white, it wasn't as big of an issue. But I do feel like with this DLC, with Lundra being the main antagonist here and just coming off so cartoony in his villainy, did feel like more of an issue in my mind. Whereas portrayal from this point forward felt overly generic to me. But anyway, here we do have Aloy and Seika essentially going undercover and pretending like they want to join the group, and through that we get this weird segment of us having to explore this lounge area that gives us a lot of insight onto Lundra, and through that have to learn this specific phrase. They're essentially lying to the other people in the room in order to prove our loyalty, and all this is just kind of weird. Either way, progressing, we find out Lundra's true plan and the fact that he's trying to build this spaceship to escape from Earth, obviously due to Nemesis, and is building this cult essentially to be these people that are beneath him in this new society that he plans on building. And again, despite my previous mention of the disappointment of the fact that despite the fact that this takes place after the events of the main game, yet has very little progression of the overall story, it's still a story that does need to take place after the events of the original game, as obviously Lundra's entire motivations are things that aren't revealed until the end of Forbidden West. Even beyond that, it does add more complexity to the Aloy-Seika relationship, where Aloy struggles with whether or not to tell Seika the truth about Nemesis's arrival, which I will say I did find a little bit weird that that's even the case, though, considering obviously Aloy's entire story across Forbidden West is largely revolved around this concept of her realizing that she can't do things alone and that she needs to let people in. And I do feel like for her to kind of question if she should let Seika in during this moment to be kind of weird when she should have already have learned that story. But again, it's not a major issue. But when we get this weird boss battle against Zeth, the leader of this outpost, which is just like random considering who cares about Zeth. This is where we do get a new weapon in this game, that being the Spectre Gauntlet, a Zenith weapon here that really was not the greatest when I used it. I didn't really use it for much longer after I originally got it, but still nice to see an addition of a new weapon here. Finally, this does lead to Aloy finally revealing to Seika the truth And Seiko also starting to be truthful to us as well, with the reveal that she knows that her sister has become part of Lundra's cult, because obviously, to which this ends up seeming to make their relationship even stronger. With us now having to take on Lundra face on at his main base, which is a theme park that he made based around dinosaurs, I guess. But to get there, we for some reason need a water wing, essentially a modification of a sun wing that is able to go underwater somehow, which we have to waste some time getting the materials for it. But after doing so, we do get to use the water wing for the first time, which also has a nice little moment here of Aloy letting Seiko use her diving mask, which again further bonds the two. I did find the overall gameplay section here to be just really weird, where essentially we're heading towards Lundra's park in a position where he's shooting missiles at us, and we have to continuously go underwater to avoid those missiles. And I just personally did not find this section fun. I just found it very finicky, and how sometimes the water would be too shallow for you to go underwater, and that can be frustrating. Also, there's points where the water wing just wouldn't build up momentum fast enough for me to get to safety quick enough. So again, I just felt like this section was just kind of annoying. But once you get to the park, it does lead to a pretty fun set piece here. Again, it is cool to be roaming around this overrun theme park, to which there's a bulk of stealth sections here against his minions, which, while stealth is definitely not the strength of Horizon, I did feel like these were pretty decent sections to actually try to stealth through, and I actually did have fun doing that here. But along the way, we do end up finding Seika's sister, Kina, who ends up being one of his most devout members, because obviously. But also here we get a weird section involving Lundra's AI, Nova, who seems to have gained consciousness and has decided to kill herself, or she wants Aloy to shut her down, which we do, which I guess this is supposed to be a commentary on how terrible Lundra is. This section did come off very strange in my eyes, but it is here that we do learn that Lundra is essentially brainwashing all of the Quen, because we obviously needed to make him even more maniacally evil, and we end up catching up to Lundra. Again, to make him even more evil, we have him calling in a slaughter spine, to where it ends up crushing one of his own cult members, with him seemingly not caring, which seems to be the breaking point for Kina. But obviously he ends up escaping, with us having to take down this slaughter spine, which ends up being a very lengthy boss battle here that did go on for way too long in my eyes. But with that takes us to our final mission, where we find out that Lundra is now heading towards the Horus to activate it, because obviously, though this entire mission ends up being a really impressive set piece of us first trying to find our way up the mountain as he starts to activate the Horus, and us having to stealth our way through these sections as he uses the Horus's arms to try to search for us. But eventually we do reach the top of the mountain to sabotage the Horus's cooling system, to which we get another similar moment here of Aloy and Seiko working together to take it down. But obviously this isn't enough to take down the entire Horus. Lundra activates it anyway, taking us to the most impressive aspect of this entire set piece, where we end up chasing the Horus down, during which Aloy realizes that she has to go on foot. And we have a good moment here for Seiko, with her being able to use the Sun Wing on her own, obviously progression of her character. But this set piece is just really insane here, as again, we're literally chasing down a Horus and us having to continuously shoot its heat sinks to overheat it. Then after that, we have this segment of us having to climb up the Horus to uncover another of its heat sinks, which again, just the overall scale of this entire battle is genuinely insane. But following this, we get a more traditional boss battle, with the Horus now being stuck in place, however attacking us with its arms, and us having to shoot the heat sinks there, all while the arms themselves are attacking us, and he's shooting things at us. And again, this is just an insane boss battle. One that you would think that, again, after defeating it here, that this would be it, but this is still not the end. But this just leads to the Horus going into the water to cool itself down, which has us now going underwater to find our way into the Horus, giving us this really cool set piece as we crawl our way through to giving us the actual final boss battle as we fight against Lundra, who's shooting shockwaves at us, and we have to shoot these tubes that are giving him power, and then also have to shoot him at the right times, considering there's a shield around the tubes, which can be annoying. And overall, I did find the boss battle as a whole here just to be kind of annoying to get through, but still just this insane sequence of boss battles here. Again, this really massive scale here, much grander than what we even seen in the original game. To to where overall this was definitely a technical feat here. Even though, again, it does make Lundra come off as just maniacally evil at the end here. But obviously this all leads up to Seiko rescuing Aloy and them flying off in the distance as the horse crashes down. This really nice moment there. But again, that's still not the end of the DLC, as we get a final couple batches of conversations here. First up, having us going back to Fleet's End, where we can have a conversation with Kina, which I feel like they could have definitely done more there, especially considering I don't feel like they really end up doing much with the Kina-Seika relationship. Also, following this, you get the final conversation with Seiko, with you meeting her at the moment where you first met for some reason. And this does end up being a nice moment here of them obviously saying their farewells, and Seiko obviously declaring her love for Aloy, the way Aloy can accept it, or I guess turn it down. Again, obviously I accepted it, but I assume that's what the other options did. But obviously they kiss. Again, obviously nice to see more LGBT representation in games. And this also does further progress Aloy's character. Again, she's kind of showing us the lessons that she learned from the original game, with her saying that she realized that home is the people that she wants to be with. And while it could be a bit on the nose, I did feel like overall this was a nice showcase of Aloy's character, feeling like this nice payoff to the concepts within the original story. But at this point, we do get the credits, something that did initially disappoint me, as I was thinking that if this is really it, again, this was a nice story to see Aloy and Seika's relationship and how it grows, and her finally getting a love interest, but it didn't really do what I wanted it to until after the credits, we get a call from Silence, who says that they need to talk, giving us this epilogue. An epilogue that also kind of disappointed me, where again, I feel like they could have probably done more to set up part 3, where obviously they do set up part 3, but not really in a way that has any true meaning to it. It's just the fact that the information that Aloy got for Lundra has revealed the location of weapons that other companies were using, where Silence thinks that they can use these weapons to destroy Nemesis. Again, this thing that could have easily been told to us in the first 5 minutes of part 3, but again, it's something, I guess. Though the main point of interest here is the farewell to Silence, where this ends up being a pretty great moment where Aloy calls out Silence on him not being able to do things on his own, and here we have Silence telling her that he needs her help to defeat Nemesis. Again, this nice progression for Silence's character. The shame is that this is obviously going to be the last time we see this same Silence here, with the obviously sad passing of Lance Reddick, the voice actor for Silence, which kind of made this scene even more impactful to me, and that the final scene that he gets to portray Silence in is one that has him fully accepting and appreciating Aloy's help. Again, I feel like this was a scene that definitely felt more impactful due to the context around it, where otherwise I probably would have thought this is a nice scene, but one that still wasn't quite enough for me. But either way, that is the entire DLC of The Burning Shores, a DLC that, again, I did enjoy. I enjoyed my time with it. I thought gameplay-wise, this was just, again, more Forbidden West, with some really great set pieces. Again, the entire horse battle is just insane. I did like the dynamic between Aloy and Seika, and just as a whole, it was just a purely enjoyable experience. Now, again, it wasn't as impactful to the rest of the series as much as I personally would have wanted it to be, but also those are purely my own expectations. I mean, for what it is a very solid DLC, one that does what you would want a DLC to do in telling a very solid side story that still has minor implications for the rest of the series, and it just makes me even more excited for Horizon 3, where seeing what they did with the horse battle in this game really just makes you wonder how they're going to handle presumably a battle with many more in a future game. So that'll be insane whenever we get it, which, I mean, expect a review of Horizon 3 whenever we get that, which is definitely years and years away. If I'm still doing YouTube by that point, I'll probably do a video on it. Also, just in general, expect more reviews, retrospectives down the road. But for now, that's the video. Thank you for watching.